Alright, I guess I'm answering Quora today instead of doing what I wanted to do. But that's okay. There's a good question on Quora. What are ultra-Orthodox Jewish men actually doing when they study Torah all day? That's the question. So what does it mean that they're studying Torah all day? And I looked at one of the other answers that was there on Quora, a guy, Tom Martin. And what he said was just totally false. I don't know where he get this idea that the Israeli government pays for people to sit and learn in kollel all day, and that therefore they don't have to work. It just doesn't make sense what he's saying. It's not true at all. The Israeli government is not paying for people to sit and study Torah all day. Do they have welfare programs like other countries do? Yes. But it's not specifically for people who are sitting and studying Torah all day. So I think, and the fact of the matter is, a lot of the ultra-Orthodox, although it's a minority of the ultra-Orthodox in Israel, do not receive any welfare from the Israeli government. They live lives of poverty, many of them, and others work, and in Israel, many ultra-Orthodox do work, even though a lot of companies don't want to hire ultra-Orthodox in Israel. So what he's saying is just nonsense, and then he also was making it sound like this idea of sitting and learning all day does not exist anywhere but in Israel, which is also totally false. And that and the claim is that that he's making is that all of the ultra-Orthodox outside of Israel work for a living, and all the ultra-Orthodox in Israel learn all day and live off the government, and neither of these is true. So before we talk about what they're actually doing during this time, let's discuss how are people supporting themselves when they're in the kollel lifestyle. And it's not only ultra-Orthodox, there are modern Orthodox kollelim, and there are even non-Orthodox Jewish kollels. The main difference, though, is generally someone outside of the ultra-Orthodox world, if they are in kollel, they have a specific goal of being ordained as rabbis, and most likely going into the rabbinate as their profession, although not necessarily. But that's a major part of what it means to sit and learn all day both in the ultra-Orthodox and in the modern Orthodox, and in certain senses in the non-Orthodox, particularly in the conservative movement. And the style of study is not that different from one to another. There's slight differences. But the question is, how are people supported when they do this? How do people keep a roof over their heads, put food on the table, when they're in this type of a situation of learning in kollel? So there's a few answers, and it's generally all of these. First of all, learning in kollel is a job like any other job. Now, you might get paid more in some jobs than other jobs, depending on what you're doing in your job. But there are people who pay for people to sit and learn in kollel and give them a paycheck, and it's a regular, I'll speak about what I know of in America. If you're studying in the kollel and you receive a paycheck from the kollel, you're an employee of the kollel. Your paycheck has taxes taken out, like as any other job. Now, it doesn't pay a lot, generally, but there is a stipend, essentially, for sitting and studying it. And this is something that doesn't only exist in the Jewish world. I mean, I was amazed to find this out, because there's so much putting down the ultra-Orthodox Jews, usually by the other Jews, whether they're, whatever community they belong to, other than the Ultra-Orthodox, and it's like this is some kind of crazy thing that the Haredim invented, that the Ultra-Orthodox Jews invented, and there's no similarity anywhere else. And what I would often say, well, it's kind of like being in a monastery, and it's kind of like being in graduate school. And really it is being in graduate school, but also like being in a monastery. So like if you're in graduate school, how do you support yourself? Sometimes if you're in graduate school, you get a fellowship and they give you a stipend for being there in the graduate school. And that's what the kollel is. It's a being in a graduate school where you receive some kind of a stipend for studying there. But also you could compare it in a way to a monastery. And at first, I was thinking monastery. I was thinking of a Catholic monastery or Buddhist monastery, and I don't know much about what goes on in these places. But with my current position, for people who don't know me, I work as a supervising chaplain in a state prison, and so I interact with clergymen of other faiths, which I've always done, but I discovered things that I never knew about. And both in the Orthodox Christian tradition, the Eastern Orthodox, and in the Islamic tradition, I've encountered people who are essentially in kollel, in their traditions. So I visited twice. I visited, and actually, technically, I'm on the adjunct. I don't get paid by the seminary, but I'm technically adjunct faculty in this seminary because I part of the seminary students, part of their curriculum is field study, where they go to a hospital and they'll go to a prison where I work, and they'll go to a nursing home and learn basics of chaplaincy. So I'm training these young men in chaplaincy, and they actually are getting CPE credits, and they're getting their master's degree, and they're getting ordained as priests in the Orthodox Christian tradition. And while they're there in the seminary, they do not pay tuition. They have room and board with their wives and children. So that's where it's different. Now, this seminary has a monastery also. Those men are not married. But then they have a seminary for priests who are going to be serving in parishes. And these men are married with children, and they live there in the seminary, and it's a community very similar to what I've seen in the Jewish communities. And they do not pay tuition, they have room and board, and they receive a stipend from the seminary, from the church, for going there, for studying there. So that's the same thing that we do. And then we have our imam, is a part of a community that came from Turkey and relocated here in America. Again, very similar to what you have in the Hasidic community, where you have, they have a charismatic leader. The Imam described him to me as, people look at him as a chosen one, very similar like a Hasidic Rebbe, even though he's clean shaven, and he's the leader of this community. He has followers all over the world, and he has the local community there where several dozen families live, and about 25 men study most of the day and receive a stipend based on how many hours they're studying the hadith and the sunnah, and each of them has to twice a year deliver a khutbah, a sermon for Jummah, for the Friday sermon, which is an important part of the Islamic tradition. Actually, the leader, he never does that, or very rarely, but he gives a class every day. But they study the texts, and he's technically considered to be a retired imam, their leader, but he's considered to be a holy man in their tradition. So it's pretty much a tremendous amount of similarity between my community, and again, they're studying texts, listening to lectures, maybe not receiving, I'm not sure if they receive I don't think they receive any kind of degree for being there. I know my imam, he went to a Christian seminary to receive his master's degree. He received his bachelor's in Turkey, but he receives a stipend for sitting there and learning in the Islamic tradition, as do 24 other men. And since he devotes some of his time to chaplaincy, so his stipend is a little less from the community, but he has the stipend from the community for the time that he spends there sitting and learning. So it's exactly the same what we have. So now the question is, what are they doing? Because that's where it's different. Obviously, there's a difference between study in an Islamic community, study in a Christian community, and study in a Jewish community. And as I said, though, the types of study generally, though, that take place in a place where someone is studying all day, it's going to be pretty much very similar whether you are studying in an ultra-Orthodox yeshiva, kollel, if you go to yeshiva university, which is considered modern Orthodox or centrist Orthodox, and really it's not going to be radically different than what you would find in a liberal modern Orthodox place like YCT, or even in a conservative Jewish, which is, I know it's called conservative, but it's actually more liberal, community, yeshiva seminary like JTS. Now their ideology is going to be different, and they might be studying other things in addition to what they're studying in the ultra-Orthodox schools, but in general it's not going to be very different. And the one thing, though, is the things that the ultra-Orthodox focus on will generally be, I think, on a higher level than what you're going to get in some of the conservative schools. But what you get in Yeshiva University, and even in Yeshiva Chovevei Torah, even though it's very controversial, it's not going to be that different. Again, the ideology is going to be different, but that's about it. And like I said, a place like Yeshiva Chovevei Torah, they're going to be doing other things similar to how in the Christian seminary they have to have chaplaincy and things. So too at YCT, they have these other programs that are in addition to this, whereas in the ultra-Orthodox, it'll probably be focused completely on what I'm going to describe. And so what is that? What are they studying in an ultra-Orthodox? They're not just sitting and reading the Bible all day. The main focus in most kollelim is going to, and it depends on the kollel, is either going to be the Talmud or the Shulchan Aruch. Those are going to be the main texts. The Talmud is a really kind of a two-part, in more than one way, encyclopedia of Jewish knowledge, where you're going to have the Mishnah, and then the comments on the Mishnah, which we call the Gemara. The Mishnah is older, and then there's going to be a difference between whether the Gemara is going to be the Babylonian version or the version that came from the Holy Land, what we call the Jerusalemite version. Let me ask this. Do you want to go here first? You want to go first? You were here first.
Sure, I didn't want to cut in front of you.
Yeah. Oh, actually, she's done there. Okay. Because I felt bad cutting in front of you, but I saw like it's difficult, so I at least wanted to communicate with you, but I wasn't going to take it before you got it. So we said there's the Babylonian version, the Jerusalem version. The Babylonian version is going to be the more common one because it's the more authoritative one. It's the newer one, and it's the more complete one in many ways. And so that was completed around the year 600, 700, thereabout. And then the Code of Jewish Law, we have came about around the 1400s. So pretty much a kol, and most kolim are going to spend some time with one, some time with another. And then in addition to that, they do have the prayers like they have in a synagogue, and they also will have, nope, there's nothing in there. They also, this is a $20 bill from 1969. I don't want to spend that, but I'm kind of desperate right now. What's in here? Nothing in here? So, and then there are many, many commentaries on both of those texts that we described. And that's pretty much, they will devote some time to Bible study with the commentaries. They will devote some time, but that's almost more in a liturgical sense. They will devote some time to other ethical teachings, which are all rooted in the Talmud. But that's pretty much going to be the main focus, is going to either be the Talmud or the Shulchan Aruch, which is the Code of Jewish Law, or both. And generally, one is going to bounce off the other. Meaning, if you're looking at the Talmud and you come across something that you find related to the Code of Jewish Law, so you're going to look at what the Code of Jewish Law has to say about that. Or but your main focus will be on the subjects that are in the Talmud, and if it's the Code of Jewish Law, you're going to go back to the Talmud to figure out where it came from. How is it done? What you'll generally do is you're going to sit at a table with a partner across the table from you, and you're going to argue back and forth. What does this text mean? And then when you're done with that, you'll go listen to a lecture, and there might be, and some of the more advanced ones have less of lecture time, and that's pretty much what's going on. And it's very intense, high-level Socratic method study. And of course, with that, there's devotional prayer, liturgical prayer, and some other studies as well, which are also going to be based on that. They're not going to be too much in-depth Bible study in a regular kollel. Not going to be too much study of like Hasidic literature. Usually there might be a little bit of that. Musar, also not that much, a little bit. And then depends on the community. If it's an out-of-town community, meaning away from a big center of ultra-Orthodox community life, they might pay a little bit more but also, or even a lot more than they pay in another kollel, but also they will do outreach work, you know, where they're going to study with people from the community or invite people from the community to study with them, uh, maybe go to a college and give a lecture or do a program, a holiday program or something, um, and be involved with other school or something like that. Um, that's less. That's what they might call a community kollel, and that's about it. But the general kollels don't have that as much. Um, but the community kollel, or they might do chaplaincy work or something like that. In addition, and also, so how they have money, the wife might work, and they might have also, from their parents some help, and also because their income is low legally. In America, you can get food stamps and Medicaid, and that uh, might also will help them, or if they can get Section 8, which is a little harder to get, and things like that. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment. All the best, and thank you.